Hey everybody, it's Daniel here from InfoRest. Hope you're all doing well. So, I want to talk about some interesting news on oil. If you've been watching oil lately, we saw that oil hit a new high for the year, about $95 per barrel. This is the WTI crude oil futures contract. And, a lot of developments over oil on what's happening and in terms of, most importantly, the supply side of things, which is causing oil prices to creep up higher and higher and higher. Now, there's this interesting article here. I'll leave the link in the description for you to read up on it. But it basically says what the lowest crude inventory what the lowest crude inventory in nearly 40 years could mean for your wallet. So basically, in other words, saying that crude oil has hit a 40-year low and hasn't seen this low in terms of the inventory in a very long time. So if I go through the first paragraph, it says U.S. crude oil inventories fell by more than 2 million barrels last week, hitting their lowest level since 1985, a development that could have far-reaching implications on oil prices by extension and prices at the gas pump. So yes, the fact that oil prices and the crude stocks are at historical low levels that we haven't seen 40 years back, it basically tells us that, hey, oil supply is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And what happens is when you look at the supply and demand curve, whenever supply shrinks on the supply and demand curve, you get the prices to move up. And that's why you're seeing crude oil future contracts move up in price because of this, right? So it also goes on saying the U.S. crude inventories, excluding those in the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, fell by almost 2.2 million barrels for the week ended September 22nd, according to the EIA. Said Wednesday, the lowest level since March 1985, and that is roughly 27% below an all-time high of 1.225 million barrels hit in 2017. Reserves in the SPR also fell to the lowest in more than 40 years earlier this month, which could diminish U.S. government's ability to influence oil prices. So what's been going on, right, especially with the SPRs, is that you see that, the U.S. has been reducing the SPRs, and the SPRs are basically a special petroleum reserves. They're these reserves that are supposed to be there in case of emergency. And what has been happening is Biden has been releasing this emergency reserve into the market to bring oil prices down. Now, since the SPRs are at the lowest levels, eventually that amount of inventory, the oil that you have in the SPRs is going to completely deplete to a point that you don't have any more to throw out in the market and influence the market. And that's why we're seeing that, okay, US is basically has stopped releasing these SPR, these oil inventory, because of how much they've already put out into the market. And it's kind of bad because these reserves are meant, again, for emergency. If there's some sort of war or, some tensions like we're seeing right now between the West and the East, that's when you would utilize those SPRs. And it was being utilized from the Biden administration to just bring the prices lower. And now that they are at very low critical levels, they've stopped that, and then you get the news of Saudi and OPEC and all of them coming out saying that, hey, we're cutting production, and that's where you get WTI crude oil moving up higher in prices, right? The lowest level it went this year was around $60, and it went up from $60 all the way to $95, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens next, right? Does the U.S. go out and start now buying to fill up their SPRs, right? Do they go out and they start buying at these high prices when, 2-3 years back when oil was, even during the COVID pandemic time, when oil was negative, they could have stocked up on a lot of oil inventory, right? A lot of oil to increase their supply, and that didn't happen, right? So now they're in trouble, and now they have to purchase if they want to stock up their SPRs at a higher price, and that's not a good thing, because if they're doing that, there you go. Now you got demand coming in from a very big country, and that also pushes up oil prices further up. So it wouldn't be surprising to see if we see $100 barrel for the WTI crude oil. And if that continues to creep up because of the low supply and the demand from the US side of things, that causes oil prices to move up. And guess what that will do? That will also show up in the inflation metrics, inflation reports, the CPI reports, which will also be very bad because, as we already know, the central banks around the world have been combating inflation and try to bring inflation down with higher interest rates. Now, if they're unable to do that and they see a spike up in oil prices, consumers see that at the gas pump, then that may mean that rates may need to stay higher for longer. And that's also not a good thing, because as we all are already seeing, bond yields have been creeping up higher and higher, causing more strain for also the market. Because as bond prices sell off, those yields go up, and those yields are moving up because of the narrative that the Fed has put in last FOMC meeting, saying that, hey, expect less rate cuts next year because the economy is doing fine. And if the economy is doing fine and handling the current rate hikes that we've seen already, and if oil prices move up, inflation spikes up, then maybe you could see those 2 rate cuts that they penciled in for next year completely be removed. And the bond market's definitely going to be the first to move on that and react and price in that, okay, maybe they're not going to cut rates next year, maybe even hike, unless something breaks. And if something breaks, then that changes the game completely. So keep an eye out on crude oil, see where it is, watch the prices there. It's come down quite a little bit from the $95 level, but it did hit that $95 level, and it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks how it plays out. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment below, subscribe, hit the like button, bell icon to be notified on the next video, and I'll see you guys around. Cheers, bye.